My name is Marin Tillett. I'm 33 years old. And the Thursday afternoon I read my aunt's message in a family thread she'd forgotten I was part of was when I finally understood that I had been carrying something for 6 years that nobody in my family had ever once picked up to examine the weight of. The message came through at 2:11 p.m. I was at my drafting desk in the back room of the architecture firm where I work, Callaway and Strand, finishing a revision on a residential floor plan that had been through 4 client iterations and was finally close to right. My phone was face up on the corner of the desk, a habit I'd had since my grandmother's health started declining 2 years ago, when I'd learned the hard way what it meant to miss a call. The notification was from a group called Tillett Family Miscellaneous, a chat my Aunt Vera had assembled 6 months earlier to coordinate a surprise birthday gathering for my grandmother and which had stayed active in the unfocused way of group chats that never quite found a second purpose. The message was from Vera. It was addressed, from context, to my cousin Deanna, who had apparently been discussing with Vera whether to ask me to help with something. The thread was mid-conversation when I read it, so I scrolled up to understand it before I understood the message that had arrived. The previous messages showed Deanna asking Vera whether she thought I would be willing to help organize the autumn gathering, given that I'd done it the year before. Vera's reply had come back in 9 minutes. Honestly, she's more trouble than she's worth. Always has been. Ask someone else. Deanna had replied, LOL, fair enough. My cousin Patrick had added a thumbs up. My uncle Sid had sent a laughing emoji. My cousin Britt, who I had driven to her college orientation 8 years ago because her parents hadn't been able to, had sent a heart. My mother, Nadine, who was Vera's younger sister and who had been in the chat the entire time, had sent a single period. Not a word. A period. As though she had started to type something and changed her mind and sent the punctuation alone, and that punctuation was somehow sufficient. I read the thread from the bottom message to the top, which took approximately 4 minutes. There were 37 messages. My name appeared in 11 of them, in context that ranged from neutral to the kind of dismissive that people use when they've been dismissing someone for so long it no longer requires effort. I was the person who always made things complicated. The one who asked too many questions. The one who, according to a message from Vera dated 3 weeks earlier that I had apparently missed when it came through, had no idea how to just let things be. I put my phone face down on the desk. I picked up my pencil. I finished the dimension notation on the floor plan section I'd been working on. I sent the revision to the client file. I answered an email from our project manager, a man named Henrik Brower, about the permit submission timeline for a commercial project we had running in parallel. I did all of this in the 40 minutes between 2:11 and 2:51, and I did it with the particular quality of focus that arrives when you've received information you're not ready to process, and your body decides that the best available response is precision. At 2:52, I opened a browser tab and navigated to the Harwick Energy autopay management portal. I logged in with credentials I had not used in 8 months, because the autopay ran without requiring my attention. I looked at the account for approximately 90 seconds. What none of them knew, what Vera had apparently never thought to mention in 37 messages of discussing whether I was more trouble than I was worth, was that the account was in my name. Had been in my name for 6 years. Had been funded from my checking account every month since the February I was 27, when Vera had mentioned, on a phone call about something else entirely, that her electric bill had gotten difficult after her hours at the dental office where she worked had been cut. I had set up the autopay the following Tuesday. I had never mentioned it again. Vera had never mentioned it again either, which was, I understood, at 2:52 on a Thursday afternoon, a different kind of message than the one she just sent. I logged out. I went back to the floor plan. I stayed at my desk until 6:15, which was my normal departure time, and I drove home and made dinner, and called my friend Osei, who knew my family in the way of someone who had heard about them over years and had therefore developed strong opinions about all of them, and I told him what had happened. He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I already know what I'm doing. I just needed to tell someone first." He said, "Fair." We talked for an hour about other things. I went to bed. I should explain the 6 years, because the 6 years require context if you want to understand how an auto payment becomes invisible to the person receiving it. My Aunt Vera is 58 years old. She is my mother's older sister by 4 years, and she has lived in the same house on Corgan Street since her husband Jeff moved out 12 years ago, a departure that was handled with the particular closed-door efficiency of my mother's family, which does not discuss difficult things directly, but instead discusses the logistics of the things those difficult things require. Jeff's departure required new financial arrangements for the house. The financial arrangements required a period of adjustment. The period of adjustment lasted longer than anyone had planned and settled into a new normal that Vera managed with moderate success and occasional gaps. I grew up knowing Vera as the aunt who came to things, birthdays, graduations, the Sunday dinners my grandmother hosted until her health made them impractical, and who had a specific quality of presence at those events that I had always, as a child, interpreted as warmth and had understood, as an adult, was more precisely described as comfort. Vera was comfortable at family gatherings. She knew how to be in a room. She had a laugh that carried and a way of making whoever she was talking to feel briefly like the most interesting person present, and this quality had always been more visible at gatherings than my own qualities, which ran toward the organizational and the logistical, and were therefore more useful before and after the event than during it. I am an architectural drafter and junior associate at Callaway and Strand, a mid-sized firm that handles residential and light commercial work across a 3-county area. I have been there for 5 years since finishing my degree at Pembroke State, and I am, by the standard measures, competent and valued. Henrik Brouwer, our project manager, has told me twice in the last year that my permit documentation is the cleanest in the office, which is not a glamorous compliment but is the kind I take seriously. I have a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood called Fenwick that I chose because it was close to the firm and had good natural light and a back bedroom I could use as a workspace. I have $26,400 in savings. I do not have debt beyond my car, which I will finish paying in March. My mother is Nadine Tillett-Brass, 61, retired from a 20-year position as a school administrator, now living in the house she has always lived in, 12 minutes from Vera's house on Corgan Street, 2 blocks from where my grandmother lives in an assisted living facility called Rivergate. My mother and Vera have been in constant contact since before I can remember. Daily calls, shared history, the particular closeness of sisters who have organized their adult lives in proximity to each other. I was not close to Vera in the way that some nieces are close to aunts, the confiding, present kind of close. I was close to her in the way I was close to most of my family, functionally, reliably, from a slight distance. The utility arrangement started in the February I turned 27, during a phone call about my grandmother's birthday. Vera mentioned at the end of the call, in the offhand way she mentioned things she found uncomfortable, that her hours at Larchmont Dental had been reduced, and the electric bill had come in high, and she wasn't sure she was going to manage it alongside the mortgage that month. She did not ask me for anything. She stated a difficulty. My family had always communicated this way. Needs were stated adjacently, not directly, and the person who heard the need was responsible for deciding whether to respond. It was a system that required you to be paying attention and willing to initiate. I was both of those things. I told her I'd take care of the electric bill. She said that was very kind. I asked for the account number. She gave it to me. I set up the autopay the following Tuesday from my laptop at my kitchen table, entered Harwick Energy as the payee, enter my checking account as the source, set the amount to the account's average monthly balance based on the last 6 months' statements she forwarded me, and scheduled it to process on the 22nd of each month. The payment for that February was $213.40. I remember the amount because I made a note of it in a spreadsheet I kept for my own tracking, a habit I had developed during my first year of full-time work when I decided to be methodical about my finances in a way my family had never been methodical about anything. I noted the payment, noted the date, noted the account. Over the following 6 years, I updated that spreadsheet every month. The February 2024 payment, the one currently scheduled for the 22nd, 11 days from the Thursday I read Vera's message, was $241.17. The average over 6 years, accounting for seasonal variation, was $218.63 per month. The total as of the previous month's payment was $15,741.36. I had never told Vera this number. I had never told anyone this number. The payments ran. The months passed. Vera's hours at Larchmont Dental had fluctuated over the years, sometimes more, sometimes less, but her mention of the utility bill had never come up again, which I had understood as either a sign that the situation had stabilized or a sign that she had stopped registering where the payment was coming from, and I had not asked which one it was. On Thursday afternoon at 2:52, I had an answer to that question. It was the second one. I did not cancel the auto payment on Thursday. I want to be precise about this because timing matters in a story like this one, and the timing was not reactive. I was at work on Thursday. I had a permit submission due Friday. I had a client call on Friday afternoon about the residential project that had been through 4 iterations. I am not someone who makes significant decisions in the middle of a workday when I have a permit submission due, and I was not going to become that person because my aunt had used the wrong register for a message she'd forgotten I would receive. I went home Thursday. I made dinner. I called Osei. I went to bed. Friday I completed the permit submission. Henrik Brower sent a reply at 4:47 that said perfect, filing this afternoon. I attended the client call. The clients, a couple named the Fairises who had been through 3 architects before us and were, by their own description particular, accepted the revised floor plan without changes. I drove home. Friday evening I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and the tracking spreadsheet I'd maintained for 6 years, and I looked at the numbers for a long time. Not at the total, which I already knew, $15,741.36, plus the February payment that hadn't yet processed, which would bring it to $15,982.53, but at the column of monthly amounts, the steady 22nd of every month progression from February 2018 to January 2024. 71 consecutive payments, each one processed without acknowledgement and without inquiry and without, apparently, any awareness on Vera's part of who it was that made her kitchen lights stay on. I called my attorney on Friday evening. Her name is Britta Solvang, and I had used her when I bought my car 2 years ago and for a lease question the year before that. She practiced general civil law at a one-partner office on Fenwick's main commercial street, 3 blocks from my apartment, and she had a habit of answering direct questions directly, which was a quality I valued enough to pay her hourly rate for. I called her at 6:30, and she picked up. I explained the situation. Voluntary auto payment, 6 years, no written agreement, no promissory note, no loan documentation of any kind. I asked if there was anything I needed to be aware of before stopping it. She said, "Zero legal obligation. It's a gift with no conditions. You can stop it tonight." I said, "Is there anything she could do if she wanted to contest it?" Britta said, "Contest what? There's nothing to contest. You've been giving her money voluntarily. You can stop voluntarily. She has no claim." I thanked her and ended the call. I sat at the kitchen table for another 30 minutes. I thought about the period my mother had sent. Not a word. A period. My mother, who had been on that thread for its entire 37-message history, who had seen Vera's messages about me accumulating over weeks, who had offered a single punctuation mark as her contribution to a conversation about whether her daughter was more trouble than she was worth. I had thought about my mother separately from Vera since Thursday afternoon because they required separate thinking. Vera's dismissal had been careless and consistent, the kind that develops in people who have never had to regard the person they're dismissing with any particular care. My mother's period was different. My mother knew me, had known me for 33 years, had been the recipient, more than anyone, of the organizational reliability and quiet competence that Vera found burdensome. My mother's silence in that thread was not carelessness. It was a choice, made in real time, to not spend a word in my direction. I held that thought for a long time. Then I opened the Harwick Energy portal and navigated to the autopay management screen. The February payment was scheduled for the 22nd. Today was Friday the 9th. I moved it to pending cancellation. The cancellation would process by Saturday midnight. The 22nd payment would not go out. I closed the laptop. I made tea. I read for 2 hours. A book about the history of load-bearing structures in pre-modern European architecture that I had been working through slowly, the way I worked through most things I wanted to retain. I went to bed at 10:15. The disconnection notice from Harwick Energy arrived, according to Vera, on Monday. She told my mother on Monday evening. My mother called me Tuesday at 9:07 a.m. I was at work. I let it go to voicemail. My mother called again at 11:44. Voicemail. At my lunch break, I listened to both messages. The first was careful, her voice even, asking me to call her when I had a moment, mentioning that Vera had received something from utility company and was trying to understand it. The second was less careful. The evenness had shifted. She said she didn't know what was going on, but she needed to talk to me before this went any further. I called her back at 12:30 from my car in the parking structure next to Callaway and Strand. Vera got a disconnection notice, my mother said when she picked up. I know, I said. A pause. What do you mean, you know? I canceled the auto payment, I said. The one I've been making on her account since February of 2018. The silence that followed was long enough that I counted it. 9 seconds. You've been paying her electric bill, my mother said. Yes. For 6 years. Yes. She doesn't. My mother stopped. Does she know? She knows I offered to help with it once, I said. Whether she's tracked where the payment comes from since then, I don't know. Another pause. Marin, why didn't you ever tell me? This was the question I had expected, and I had prepared an honest answer for it. Because it would have become a thing, I said. And I didn't want it to be a thing. I wanted to help and not make it complicated. I waited a moment. I read the thread, Mom. Silence. I've been in that chat since Grandma's birthday last June, I said. I read all of it. 37 messages. That was a private. I know, I said. I'm not calling to discuss what was said. I'm calling because you asked me to, and because I want you to know directly that I canceled the payment, and I'm not going to restart it. Vera's going to. She stopped again. Her bill is due at the end of the month. I know. She has time to make other arrangements. Marin. My mother's voice had the particular quality I had learned to recognize over 33 years as the one she used when she was about to say something she had rehearsed. You have to understand that Vera doesn't always, she says things. You know how she is. I know how she is, I said. I've known how she is for 33 years. I've also been paying her utility bill for 6 of them. The silence this time was different. It had a texture to it, the kind that comes when someone is assembling a response to something they hadn't fully accounted for. She doesn't know that, my mother said finally. I know she doesn't, I said. That's part of what I've been thinking about. What does that mean? I had been precise about this in my own thinking, and I wanted to be precise now. It means that the reason Vera felt comfortable writing what she wrote is that nobody in that thread, including you, thought to consider what I actually do for this family. Because what I do doesn't show up at gatherings. It shows up on the 22nd of every month, and nobody thinks about the 22nd of every month, because it just works. My mother was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice had shifted again, not to warmth, but to something more careful. I sent a period, she said. I want you to know I've been thinking about that since Thursday. I know you have, I said. I should have said something. Yes, I said. You should have. A pause. Are you all right? I'm fine, I said. I'm at work. I need to go back in. Can we talk this weekend? Yes, I said. Sunday. I ended the call. I sat in my car for 3 minutes. Then I went back to my desk and spent the afternoon on a site assessment for a new project, a small commercial renovation on the west side of Fenwick that Henrik had assigned me the previous week. I worked with the same focused precision I'd been working with since Thursday, and the work was good. And at 6:15 I drove home. Vera called Thursday of that week. I had been expecting her to call earlier and had revised my expectation twice before she actually called, which told me she had spent longer than I'd anticipated deciding how to approach the conversation. I answered. This surprised her. She said, "Oh," in a way that suggested she had been prepared to leave a voicemail. I got a disconnection notice, she said. I know, I said. The auto payment on your Harwick account was mine. I canceled it. A pause, shorter than my mother's had been, because Vera processed things quickly, whatever else was true of her. Since when, she said. February 2018. Silence. 6 years, I said. 71 payments. The total as of last month was $15,741.36. I had debated whether to give her the number. I had decided to, not as a grievance but as information, the kind of precise, unambiguous information that my family rarely dealt in, and that I thought this conversation required. I didn't know that, Vera said. I know you didn't. I thought, she stopped. I thought the account was on some kind of program. A budget plan. This was, in its own way, a clarifying answer. Not a lie, I thought. A genuine misapprehension that had been more comfortable than an inquiry would have been. It was my checking account, I said. Every 22nd. Marin. Her voice had found its footing now, the practiced register she used when she needed to navigate something. I want you to know that what I wrote in that chat was I was venting. Deanna was pushing me, and I said something I didn't mean the way it came out. What way did you mean it? I asked. A pause. That's not fair. I think it's a reasonable question. I meant, she stopped again. I was frustrated. It wasn't about you specifically. My name was in 11 of the 37 messages, I said. 8 of them were about me, specifically. The silence this time was the longest of the call. I heard a chair move somewhere on her end of the line. Her breath. I'm embarrassed, she said finally. It was the first direct thing she'd said, and I registered it. I know, I said. I had no idea you were, she stopped. 71 payments. Yes. Why didn't you ever say anything? This was Vera's version of my mother's question, and I had the same answer ready. Because saying something would have made it complicated, I said. And I didn't want it to be complicated. I wanted to help. And now I've made a different decision, I said. The disconnection notice gives you enough time to set up a new payment method before anything lapses. I wanted you to have the information from me. Is there, she paused, is there anything that would change this? I had thought about this question too, because it was the question underneath all the other questions, and I wanted to answer it honestly. I don't think so, I said. Not right now. I think some time and some different conversations might change what's possible later. But right now, no. She said, I understand. And then, I'm sorry, Marin. I mean that. I know, I said. I appreciate it. We ended the call. It was the most direct conversation I had ever had with Vera in 33 years, and it had been made possible by the information she'd never known she was missing. I did not find this satisfying in the way some endings are satisfying, the clean kind, with a clear moral center and a resolution that closes the door. What I found was something more complicated, a woman who had been careless with me for years and who was now, in the particular way of people who have been confronted with a specific and unexpected fact, genuinely reconsidering. Whether that reconsideration would go anywhere was not something I could know on Thursday. I let that be uncertain. My mother and I talked Sunday as planned. She had spent the week doing what my mother did with difficult information, processing it thoroughly before speaking, running it through the filter of every related thing she knew, arriving at the conversation with a version of understanding that was more fully formed than mine usually were at that stage. She told me she had spoken to Vera twice. She told me that Vera had set up a new payment arrangement through Harwick's budget billing program, a fixed monthly amount based on her previous year's usage, which Harwick offered to eligible customers and which a customer service representative named Troy Hansel had helped her set up over the phone. The fixed amount was $229 a month, which was within Vera's budget with some adjustment to her other spending. I noted that Harwick had a budget billing program. I had not known this when I set up the autopay in 2018. If I had known, I might have pointed Vera toward it then. I held that thought without drawing a conclusion from it. My mother said, I've been thinking about what you said, about the 22nd of every month. What about it? I should have known, she said. That's what I keep coming back to. You and I talk every week. I should have known what you were doing. You didn't ask, I said. And I didn't tell you. That's not, she paused. That's not an excuse. I should have asked. I said, yes. She said, I'm sorry about the period. I said, I know. We talked for another 90 minutes about my grandmother's health, which was stable, about my current project at the firm, which I described in more detail than I usually did, about a trip my mother was planning to take with a friend the following month to a coastal city she'd been wanting to visit. It was the longest call we'd had in months, maybe years, and the quality of it was different from the usual calls. Less managed, more direct, with more space in it for actual information. I did not tell her I had documented every payment in a spreadsheet. I did not tell her the total again. Some things are useful to say once in the moment when they carry meaning, and repeating them would be a different kind of thing. I saw Vera at my grandmother's birthday gathering 6 weeks later, at a restaurant called Hartfield Grill where my grandmother had asked to have her 83rd. Vera was there with Deanna. We were at the same table. She came over to where I was standing near the window before the food arrived and said, "I meant what I said on the phone." I said, "I know." She said, "I'd like to do better." I said, "I'd like that too." We did not embrace. We returned to the table. The dinner was good. My grandmother, who had a way of observing things without commenting on them that I had always admired, watched the two of us from across the table with an expression I recognized as satisfaction. The auto payment did not restart. I took the $241.17 a month and added it to the savings line in the spreadsheet I'd been keeping since I started working. By December, the savings account had a number in it that I had been working toward for 2 years. I finished paying off the car in March. I signed up for a drafting software certification course that Callaway and Strand would reimburse if I passed, and I was going to pass because I was careful and consistent, and for the first time in a long time that description felt like something I had claimed rather than something that had been assigned to me. There is a kind of helping that makes itself invisible, not because the person helping intends to hide it, but because the person receiving it has no reason to look. The help arrives. The lights stay on. The months pass. And the helper, who started with a genuine impulse toward care, gradually becomes part of the furniture, present in the way that functional things are present, registered only in the absence and evaluated, in unguarded moments, by how convenient they are to have around. What I learned in the 6 months after that Thursday in February was not that generosity is a mistake. It isn't. What I learned is that generosity without visibility creates a particular kind of silence, the silence of the person receiving the help convincing themselves that things are simply the way they are, rather than the way someone made them. And that silence, left long enough, becomes the room you're evaluated in, becomes the thread, becomes the period. The thing that changed wasn't my willingness to help. That's still there, intact, available to the people who've earned the right to call on it. What changed was my willingness to be invisible while doing it. That's not a harder life. It's a more honest one. If you were sitting with me on that Thursday afternoon, reading those 37 messages, was there a single one that would have been the one for you? Was it the message itself? Or was it the period your mother sent? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. A new one posts every week. Like this video if you've ever kept the lights on for someone who didn't know it was you. And if someone in your life needs to hear this today, send it to them. I'll see you next week.